And welcome back to another edition of the Head Game podcast. My name is Dr. Lee Piccarello, courtesy of my co-host Jess Ferdinand. We are back yet again for another exciting rendition of the Head Game podcast, where powered by Mindful Athlete Training, which gets these athletes into the zone faster and keeps them there longer. Today's discussion is all about addiction, a failure to feel, escapism. And we're going to get a very wide net perspective on a host of issues as it relates to this core concept of addiction. But as typical for our Head Game discussion, we're going to make more of that concerted effort to continuously bring it back to the athlete, the concept of performance, fans alike, and how it impacts the natural competitor in all of us. Good morning, Jessica. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing great, as you can see. Sports. If you've been following us on the podcast,
take a moment and catch your breath. It's okay.
Sports is back. It's not. It's coming back.
You've been waiting so long to say that.
I should cry.
You're a little flush, but it matches your jersey.
I don't even care, and there is a thing with the fans. I have no, it does not matter to me. Someone said, oh, it's really different that there's no fans here. And I was like, I kind of just watch the game. But for basketball, however, I don't. I think I appreciate the intensity that happens, because it's all eyes are on the center. Whereas baseball, you're kind of outside. I don't know.
I think that for me personally, I have watched a couple of exhibition games. I watched some video highlights this morning of Stanton hitting a home run for the Yankees.
Yeah. Ooh.
I'm just going to be
MLB season.
It is, and let me tell you that it stirred absolutely nothing in me.
Maybe
whatsoever.
So, see, that's another thing.
No.
Maybe it's because it wasn't your home.
No, it's because there's no one there. It's because
I think I can care less.
But this is kind of the point, right?
Yeah.
So let's for discussion purposes sort of get right into the notion of addiction, escapism, and what about us genetically may make us a stronger candidate to engage in different types of behavior. Let's just go over the basics, core concepts. What typical things people get addicted to? Food, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, sex, gambling, video games. The list can go on and on and on. Different types of food. People get addicted to sugar versus carbs. There's the common diet where you have your carb day, your heavy carb day. I know that Dr. Stevens likes to engage every now and then on a carb day.
A heavy carb day.
Maybe not a heavy carb day, just a carb day. You think about social media. We've talked about in past shows FOMO, fear of missing out, or FOBO, fear of a better option. There are more recent reports, which we highlighted here on the Head Game, of neuroscientists that are throwing their hat into Silicon Valley, that are creating apps that specifically attack neurotransmitters in the brain with delayed gratification, which is an addiction model, which then sets up these young people. As I've said many times before, how old do you have to be to have a drink of alcohol?
Where are you at in the world?
United States.
21.
How old do you have to now be
21.
How old do you have to be to smoke a cigarette or to engage in tobacco?
Is it 18 or 21?
I think it's now 21. It was once 18. It got bumped up. How old do you have to be to have a smartphone?
An infant?
Yeah. Well, apparently so.
Yeah,
right?
People. I see babies with tablets.
So now you have this exposure of a substance we can call the social media content, a substance that is frenzied upon it. I have this vision of a really bad 1980s movie, Piranha, where some poor sap decides to go for a swim in a barren lake and thousands of piranha feast on him. That's kind of what social media is doing to America's youth. The the global youth is being more attacked by this particular substance. That's just one. Television in general, when you think about a recent statistic I just heard, 2010, approximately 115, 120, don't quote me directly, Americans subscribed to some type of cable TV package. That has dropped 20% in the last 10 years, and they are anticipating another 10% in the next 3 years. Why? Because everyone is streaming something.
Yeah.
It's available at any time.
Technically, that is cable,
right?
By the way.
Well,
because you can watch cable TV on like YouTube now.
But it's not cable TV to the big giants of the Fox News, MSNBC, CNN,
Comcast,
which then kind of fuses into what type of content is actually available, which may increase the likelihood that you get addicted, what I refer to as the winter blizzard phenomenon. Pre-COVID-19, any time that you would pay attention to the news for more than 2 hours was the anticipation of a blizzard. You might actually pay attention to the news for a couple of days. Now the blizzard phenomenon is everywhere. Everything is catastrophic. Everything is the sky is falling. And what this does potentially to the brain, the human brain, because addiction, let's be very clear, in many definitions is a neurochemical dependency. That means there's something about our brain chemistry that we should be producing that we're not, we are deficient in, or we are receiving some type of stimulus, which is giving us that neurochemical boost. And therefore you have the associated behavior. Have you ever been addicted to anything? Anything that you're willing to discuss?
I haven't been addicted to any of like the really shiny things that people think of addiction, but I've definitely been addicted to my phone. That's like a normal, I think that's more like a growing up thing. And it's gotten to the point, and I think I said this when we spoke about this topic before, it's gotten to the point where I grew up with technology. So I just grew up using it. I grew up just being used to going to bed with the phone in my hand and waking up with the phone in my hand. Like that was my normal routine. And now that I'm a little bit older, I am so turned off by it. I read books now. When I see someone on their phone, I'm like, oh my, like I'm like an old man or a woman. I'm like, oh come, like you're gonna be on your phone this whole time. Like,
are you trying to insinuate that I'm an old man? Is that what you're saying?
It's just like, it used to be the parents, and now when I see a family out, because this is very common, a family's out to dinner, and everyone is on their phone, including the parents. I'm like the person like, I make the noise. Really?
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at. So, but to answer your question, I think what's interesting about addiction. No, I haven't been severely addicted to anything. No. But it's interesting when I'm looking at this topic and I see this term of escapism. Mm-hmm. Because that is it really brings it into a whole other just discussion for me.
So explain.
Well, okay. So the first thing I can go to is when I was in my undergraduate career, I wrote a really well, I think I got 100 on it, so I think it was good. I wrote a paper on why Star Wars changed the world. And one of my main themes was the escapism. It was escape from reality. So, but that's not really healthy. You need to have a reality. And when we're talking about something like a phone, which is now embedded into our everyday life, it's kind of scary for me to think okay, this is our escape from reality, but it's kind of not. It's also tying us into reality. It's like this whole other dynamic that my brain's just trying to figure out, because it's no longer just something fun. It can be helpful. We need phones to stay alive now. If we didn't have a phone, we'd be well, what am I going to do? What if I get into an accident? What if I have an emergency?
Right.
It's so ingrained into us. I'm interested to see where the conversation goes, because I want to get to the bottom of it.
Well, I think for me in particular.
You muted yourself.
I did.
Oh, don't ever mute yourself.
It was completely on accident, and and I apologize.
I do believe that it was an accident.
Of course it is. I
You would never actually mute yourself.
No, I always want to be heard, and that's just something that I've come to accept. I'm going to flip the script on you just a little bit.
Okay.
While the discussion, the title of our discussion is about escapism, this failure to feel, I could make the argument that addiction is wanting to feel too much.
Okay.
And let me explain. Because I think the stereotype of addiction is people who, when you look statistically at their emotional and psychological profile of when they are struggling with some type of addiction, we'll just say drugs and alcohol because that tends to get the most attention, okay? We listed a host of other things that are relevant as well. But when you think about drugs and alcohol, people tend to gravitate to this idea that someone who has a lowered self-worth, a lowered sense of self-esteem, is going out and medicating to numb their proverbial pain. Therefore, they're escaping. Okay? However, if you think about the rewarding nature to the human brain of a chemical, what really addiction can be conceptualized as is wanting to feel that state of ... that state of euphoria, that state of elation. More often, what they're really bathing in is wanting to feel that way again and again and again, because we are a neurochemical creature. If you think about how chemicals, testosterone, estrogen, cortisol, the stress hormone, that's constantly fluctuating. You think about the neurochemical aspect of our brain. You think about things like acetylcholine, dopamine. You think about norepinephrine. These are neurotransmitters in the brain that are strongly correlated with things like depression and anxiety. So what we are really doing is the byproduct as people see it is to escape. But what they're really doing is they're saturating themselves with the feeling that they themselves don't experience on their own, organically or naturally, or they have experienced once before by drinking too much, partying too much. Think about the concept of cigarettes. What do you associate a cigarette with? Have you ever smoked?
No,
but you've been to France a whole lot, so I have to admit that you probably you've copped at least some secondhand smoke.
Yeah,
yes, it is.
It's very normal there. I think of tobacco, which is like universally known since I was little that it's really addictive. It's like literally the first thing that comes to my mind with a cigarette, or the process of having a cigarette like this and going like this. That's addictive.
Oh, completely. There's also a social addiction model. When I take a sip of my whatever this might be,
who knows?
This is going to make me more comfortable when I'm in a social setting. There have been social psychology experiments that have asked people to go out to a bar, a social setting, and have a conversation without something in their hand. And then afterwards, they report a general sense of awkwardness or discomfort. Think about the recovering alcoholic that's constantly ordering, when they are going out, a seltzer with a twist of lime. It gives the impression, it gives the presentation that they are drinking something. It's allowing them more to relax. So this whole concept of addiction, it's not just about the substance. Again, it's about how that substance makes us feel, and then the connection in our mind of how we might be able to go out and experience that again.
Yeah, there's two different points to this. The first point is that where does the addiction first start from? Like, and you kind of hit on that it's something's being neglected, something's not being taken on like just straight on, and therefore you kind of go into another direction to try and hide that, which is very common. The other part of addiction for me is what is interesting about addiction is you don't ever actually get through the addiction. You kind of create a new habit of something that's not as life-threatening or not as dangerous or wasn't as bad as whatever you were doing before. For example, if you have an alcoholic, when they go through their sobriety, I know one in particular that now all she drinks is seltzer, and it's fine. She's very happy, but it's like she went from one to the other. One's not going to be causing detrimental issues, and all it was is a switch of a habit, but she's still keeping the addiction in a way.
The clinical term for what you are describing is referred to as transfer addiction. And it has a lot of research behind it in actually obesity and gastric bypass surgery, which speaks to people who will go to surgical lengths to try to lose weight, who have been deemed morbidly obese, which is code for your weight can potentially kill you at any time due to hypertension, due to diabetes, whatever the circumstances might be. That transfer addiction, though, because they might be addicted to food, can easily transfer to another substance, some of the ones that we've mentioned. It's very delicate for that person to have a better understanding of the behaviors they are engaging in once they've gone through those steps. When you go to an AA meeting, which I have attended a number of them, I've done research on the profiles of people that attend open versus closed meetings. I've done some research on sponsorship and what's that like, the 12-step program. When you think about it, there's someone who is on coffee duty for AA meetings. Their only responsibility for the meeting is to show up 30 minutes earlier and make about 2 gallons worth of coffee. You also then think about the smoke breaks that are encouraged or are taken during the meeting, perhaps halfway, whoever's running the meeting, if someone is sharing, if there's a guest speaker. So if you think about these additional substances, nicotine and caffeine, as we all know, both highly addictive substances, can we make the argument that this replacement addiction is being fostered through the concept of recovery?
Yes, I've been saying this for a long time. Caffeine is really interesting in the Western hemisphere, Western culture in particular. When I go over to Europe and I order a coffee, I get almost like an espresso cup, and it's probably a little bit bigger, and that's how much coffee they drink. In America, we go to Dunkin' Donuts and get an extra large, dark, whatever, roast coffee, and we're like, all right, I can go for another one.
That's 60% sugar, by the way. That's why America runs on Dunkin'.
But
still waiting for them to call, by the way.
You know,
they
whatever.
Right.
We'll get to them in another show. An interesting question that I wanted to bring up is, does being addicted to something always have to have such a negative connotation to it? Is being addicted, could that possibly lead to positivity?
So I was going to try to hold off and not storytell in the back half of the hour, but since you brought it up...
Well, how much time do we have left?
I need a time check, by the way.
What's our time check?
We got about 10 minutes. Okay.
Oh, man. You get 5.
No. I don't need 5. I've been working on trimming the fat.
Okay.
But I'm bum. And anything? Nobody? Okay. When I was a junior in college... I was encouraged to lose weight. Why? Because for the first 3 years in college, I was encouraged to gain weight. So I arrived at Lehigh University a slim and trim, 195 pounds. This is as an inside linebacker in the late 80s.
So you were trim.
I was trim.
Yeah, 195.
Right. I'm 240 right now. Okay? So that's roughly 50 pounds. Okay? Just put that in perspective. Because they told me to gain weight by working out, eating, feeding, everything. At the end of my junior spring, I was 248 pounds.
Properly? Like, when I say properly, I mean like working out, eating.
Properly.
Like,
yeah. All of those things. Which, by the way, is easy to do.
Yes.
At that age,
for some reason, for guys more,
right,
to drop weight and gain weight, but...
So at the spring meetings, when I sit down with my position coach, you get a nice, lengthy, outlined version, strengths, weaknesses, how you did this year, individual statistics, an entire comprehensive review. Yeah. This is who you are. This is how you were. And then at the very bottom, there are goals to work on over the summer. And it said very specifically, we need you lighter, we need you faster. We're going to change the defense. We need you more nimble. We need you more hash to hash.
Yeah.
And then they had my goal weight that they wanted me to arrive at camp. This meeting was in April. This was the following August. So I had May, June, July, 3 months. I was 248 pounds. They asked me to come in at 212. So for the entire summer,
you were addicted.
So for the entire summer, my breakfast was a banana and yogurt. My lunch was tuna out of the can. And my dinner was mac and cheese without the cheese. So I had boxes of mac and cheese, which
you would just make
I would just make the tiny little macaroni.
That's so gross.
Right. And I would eat it out of the pot. I did that for 3 months. I ran twice a day, once at around 6 in the morning, the other about 10 at night before I went to bed. And I had about 3 hours of weightlifting in between. And I came in at 209 pounds. And I was weak as a baby bird.
Yeah.
But why I share that story is when you think about addiction, sometimes what is encouraged, what is promoted by others as an athlete, think about what athletes go through. We could have an entire show about painkillers. I could talk to you about 80s, phenoms like Brett Favre, the first real athlete that I remember that brought attention to being addicted to the painkiller Vicodin because he had bad knees. So you think about what we say. People often say success is defined by what you have to give up to get it. That's always resonated with me. And what I think we don't realize in many instances is that when athletes give something up in the namesake of their sport, more importantly, in the name of success, they are now making themselves more receptive to that addiction model, whether it be meds, whether it be food, restricting it, weight loss, addicted to exercise. So can you do something really positive which can lead to an addiction? Yes. Some people could say, I'm totally addicted to exercise. I have to do it every single day. I'm addicted to running. How can that be a bad thing? Well, if you look closely, there might be some tough stuff in there that a lot of people don't want to talk about.
Yeah, I also don't like how things are just thrown around, like you were just saying. Like, oh, I'm addicted. I hear that often. I'm addicted to literally whatever, and it could be the smallest thing. And it's the same that goes for when people say, I'm depressed. It's a really heavy clinical term to be putting on things, but that's just a side note. When I first thought of that question that I asked you is, can addiction be positive? I at first thought no. And I wanted, I enjoyed that. Like I like that my thought was there, and it's kind of has shifted throughout the show so far. I thought that it can't be positive because when you think of something that's addictive, it's kind of controlling you. Like you're no longer in control. So how can that be something that's positive? Like even if you're addicted to running, if you don't run that day, you had a bad day.
I think it's deemed as positive, Jessica, because the stereotype associated with that behavior is a healthy one. Right. So, but to your point, when the addiction is set in stone and then removed, the aftermath is very, very negative. Yeah. But I think people tend to overlook what is really addictive behavior. There's a very clear clinical line between when you are doing something way too much, which is not in your best interest, which is what we call substance abuse. And then that carries over to, if we're not engaging in that behavior, now we start to have more negative impacts like withdrawal. It starts to impact mood, and that's dependency. Yeah. So that gamut of abuse to dependency, I think a lot of people fall under and really don't even, or they're not even aware of it.
So I have a question then.
Yes.
If your addiction is positive, I don't know how to word my question. You
mean the behavior associated with the addictive behavior?
So I'm thinking of like working out. Like working out's good for you. You should work out.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because when I think of dependency, I have a negative connotation on dependency. But
Yes.
if you're depending on working out, that's technically a good thing, right? Like technically you're putting your physiology, your body, your mind, everything's working together. Is that such a bad thing? Like if I wake up every morning and I have to do yoga, but technically I'm being mindful, I'm breathing, is that a bad thing that I'm dependent on that?
I think it's a bad thing that if your need to engage in yoga is so strong that you neglect whatever might be important to you in your life.
Okay, so like if I have a child and they say, "Mommy, something, something, something," I say,
Not right
"Oh,
now,
no,
honey.
Johnny, I need to go do yoga."
Right. Mommy has to work
Okay.
out. You need to go figure it out
I'm
yourself.
glad I cleared that up.
Right?
Yeah.
But think about those decisions. Again, success being defined as what you have to give up to get it. If in my mind that yoga makes me successful, I was just talking to Dr. Stevens about how I'd like to say it's in the name of addiction, that this week I've engaged in a lot of different habits. I typically reward myself with a beer or a cocktail at the end of every workday. I decided
Nice.
this week I was not going to do that.
I like that.
Cold turkey. I also creep into bed around 10:30 and then engage in mindless TV watching, typically till about midnight. I did not do that.
This whole week?
Whole week. So I technically went to bed about 90 minutes earlier.
Interesting.
And then, if that was not enough, I started to attend my gym in the morning, which I have never done. I am typically a lunchtime, give myself a break in the middle of the day. But because our clinical practice is really starting to pick up, we've got new interns in, it's requiring more of my time for training. I've been neglecting working out at lunch. So I flipped the script and started going this morning, which I actually did today.
Ooh.
So what are the benefits? I would like to
Say
think
your research study you conducted on yourself.
I'm clearer than ever. I lost 3 pounds.
Mental clear, right?
So now I'm down to 237 and not 240.
You're
Alert
gonna
the
have
media.
some noodles tonight for dinner.
I don't know. I'm actually on my own tonight for dinner.
You most likely
the
will
wife
have
and the
some
kids are
noodles.
out of town for the weekend. I'm just saying, I might have to splurge. But wouldn't that be a very wouldn't that be riddled with irony at the end of this week for me to go back to perhaps old behavior and then maybe indulge in just a little bit more because I've been so good to myself all week long? That's human behavior, Jessica.
Right. So to this question or to statement, I think that as long as you are actively getting better in your own eyes, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's like if you're dieting, for example, and then one day you're like, I just really want a donut. I think you should be able to have a donut because you're growing and you know, okay, like I had it. I'm going to go back to trying to better myself. But now if you get that donut, like tonight, what are you going to order? Let me hear what your like thing. What was your thing?
Why are you going pasta and donuts? What if it's a nice summer salad with a piece of salmon on top?
Actually,
because
that sounds delightful.
I tend to like that.
Okay.
My wife makes a
Yeah.
mean salmon.
Ooh.
Just saying.
I make pretty good salmon.
Do you?
Probably not as good as.
Well, you probably have that French flair to it, because of all. Because. So, but to that point, if we are denying ourselves of something that makes us feel good, is it just a matter of time before we go bad?
Here's my thank you for helping me make my point. Sometimes I go in circles. I think I led myself in it. Wait, hold on. I think I can get back to it. If you are growing, meaning I'm going back to my diet. I think people, when they want to lose weight, they say, okay, you know what? I'm going to go cold turkey. I'm going to kind of do what you did. And what happens after they lose their weight is they gain it back double. Why? Because they didn't really do it in the correct way. They didn't really figure out their bodies, what they like to, you know what I mean? Like they're not saying, okay, it's not going to be helpful for me to just eat like this. I need a bread in the morning, or I want to have a coffee in the morning with some sugar in it. So if you do it properly and kind of like not just so like drastically, like I don't believe that you did your college weight loss this past week. I think that you were
no. But if you think about it, though, Jessica, what I think is the larger point is when you look at, say, what I did 30 years ago, that's not healthy weight loss. Going
Right.
from almost 250 to 209 in 3 months, that's not healthy. I just happened to be able to sustain it because of the sport that I was playing. But to the larger point, which I think we're going to be able to get back to after the break, is because I kind of have that feeling that's about that time. When someone is introduced to a change in behavior, is it providing that neurochemical boost that then maybe gets out of their control, which then starts to lead to problems, and it has that ripple effect into the things that they care about the most. So we are about half past the hour. We're going to take a short break and listen to our sponsors. Dunkin' Donuts, we're still waiting for you to call. My name is Dr. Lee Piccarello. This is the Head Game Podcast, powered by Mindful Athlete Training, where we get athletes into the zone faster and keep them there longer. So we are back. My name is Dr. Lee Piccarello on the Head Game Podcast. Today we are talking about addiction and the concept of escapism. Specifically, we've reviewed a host of what most people would call vices, things that they engage in that we don't necessarily recognize at first that are really in our best interests. A casual drink may lead to problematical behavior. Too much food, restriction of it, video game usage, probably in July 2020 is at an all-time high. Children, adolescents have been in quarantine for months. There's no real script that parents are following, or should I say a traditional one that's being provided through the attendance of school. The list goes on and on and on. Wanted to bring on Hunter Stevens, Dr. Hunter Stevens, as a guest to kind of get his take. Welcome back to the show, my man. How are you?
Thanks for having me again.
Let's just kind of get right after it. Do you think that, what's your concept of addiction? How would you describe it?
I think addiction is an interesting concept. When I'm thinking about addiction, I tend to think about the chase. I think about drugs and alcohol. I think about escapism, but I also think about coming to something or reaching something of fulfillment that you get from addiction.
Chase. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So in research, they've did some research on addiction, especially with drug addiction, and they found that there was a spike in neurotransmitter release that includes happiness or drive, and there was actually a spike when they were going to get the drug versus actually getting the drug themselves. So the chase of getting there, of trying to chase that high, included that spike of that neurotransmitter, of almost similar to the actual high itself.
Now, when you say chase, this is something that I've actually, in explaining to clients what addiction is like. When you said chase, the first thing that I went to is, you ever seen a National Geographic video of like a cheetah just stalking its prey? And, you know, they're touted as some of the fastest land animals on the planet. I think they top out at like mid to high 80s. At least I think that's something that I've read. And when they stalk in the high grass, sometimes it'll take them 10 minutes to move 5 feet. But their eyes are like pie plates. They're literally built to prey upon. And you can just tell that chase, that electricity, because very often after they do kill their prey, which they then take back to their family, they're hanging out over in the high grass ready to take a nap. They're not even engaging in the very prey that they've killed, because that window of time where I could make the argument, if we transfer that to human beings, is the time in which we feel the most alive. So when you say the chase, personally, can you relate to a time in your life where you felt the most alive, that maybe if someone was watching would say, hey, Hunter's addicted?
Addiction's interesting for me. I feel like I definitely have I'm sure, been addicted to things. And when it comes to that, I think about the chase significantly. And it gives me, again, it brings me back to my professional and collegiate experience as an athlete of chasing success and being addicted to success and wanting success. And in that turn, ignoring failure, avoiding failure, trying to get rid of failure and chasing I want a national championship. I want a title. I want the biggest contract I can. And so that chase aspect was, I'm addicted to that drive that, okay, I need to be at the gym at 6:30 when everyone else gets there at 6:45. I need to make sure that I'm ready to practice in sweat when practice starts at 8, but I've been there since 7:15. And that's kind of where I've been, of the lead by example and drive by that. And I thrived off that of, okay, I have to do all I can to get there. And so in my career, I've had others discuss this with me, of connecting with me because of the drive, because of the chase for that success. And the truth is, I never got there. And that withdrawal, if you will, that comes with that is challenging. And
the void.
Mm-hmm. But that's when you learn about yourself, the withdrawal. I think addiction, we don't really talk about the withdrawal experience too much, because those are the most devastating times, even more so sometimes.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you bring that up, because you're right. We don't talk about the learning experience that comes from the withdrawal, because there's so much focus on how destructive the addictive behavior can be, who it impacts. The person who's struggling with the addiction, which we refer to as the identified patient in the clinical world, or the athlete who's recovering from that knee surgery and they've gotten themselves hooked on the painkillers. Or very often we hear about athletes, when they do get busted, talk about taking the performance-enhancing drugs to recover from injury faster, to get back on the field sooner. So it's in the name of that chase, of that push, that drive. It also it allows me to kind of go back and with some of my own endeavors. I don't think that I've ever been addicted to one thing per se in its stereotypical sense, but everyone who has known me my whole life refers to me as a gross overachiever. And I find that interesting. And when I say the people that have known me the longest, I could probably count on one hand, not including my parents or my wife. These are friends, people that I see, throughout the course of a year, a lot less the older that you get and you're building your own family and your own life. When they weigh in, when they hear what I've been doing, when I send them a clip of the podcast that we've transferred from radio after starting my private practice and beginning with clinical and leading to sport performance after I've gotten my doctorate, I'll get the little barbs like, you're such an overachiever, or some people might refer to that as type A. I don't see myself as type A. Mm-hmm. Do you see me as type A?
It's always putting me on the spot here.
Right on, right on. I'm throwing it out there.
Right.
Do you?
I think there are aspects and elements of it, but not necessarily full blown.
I don't know if I could fully accept that answer, Dr. Stevens, but we can review that later behind closed doors. When you think about how this concept of the chase, how it drives you as a human being, let's just talk for a second in your experiences. What other people might struggle with just across the board that can potentially fall into this category? Things that resonate with you when I say the addicted athlete per se. When you think about the athlete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about, there's a variety of aspects. So you definitely have the people who work out. I've had athletes on my team who are volleyball, you need upper body strength, not as significant as probably lower body and core strength. But we had athletes who would just, we would have a full day of lifting, full day of practice, and then they would be back in the gym just doing bench. And we benched maybe once or twice a week, and they were benching 4 or 5 days a week. And I don't know if it was aesthetic look, right? Look good, play good mentality, or if it was just addicted to that high of working out, of getting stronger, getting better. Along those lines, too, is the competitive aspect, wanting to compete, always wanting to compete in everything you do. And we talk a lot of, when people are competitors, those people are driven, those people are killers. Think about Kobe Bryant, Tom Brady, right? Those, Michael Jordan. Those are people, Tiger Woods. Those are the people who would bet $1,000 on a game of rock, paper, scissors. Those are people who are out there to compete all of the time, and they're addicted to competition. Not even just winning, but the competition itself is the thrill, the chase, that something has to be on the line at all times. And that chase of there's something on the line is something that's meaningful to them. I think there are people who, as athletes, may also be addicted to the lifestyle. I have to live a certain way. I have to be a certain way. I have to act a certain way.
Look a certain way.
As an athlete, there's this stereotypical person, and when you get
persona,
when you get risen to the high and put on
Yes.
this pedestal as an athlete, we see it so many times with people who, after their careers, don't know what to do with themselves, or still try to live that way. And then there's some aspect and elements where they do have mental breaks, where the mental challenge and the mental fatigue that comes with that, of the shift, of the withdrawal of the sport that they were in, of the cheer, of the crowd, right? Crowd noise can be that addictive. I need that attention. I need that adrenaline rush, if you will. Adrenaline athletes, right? We don't talk enough about them. They're addicted, but they're also praised for it.
It's interesting that you bring up the adrenaline athlete, because I'm sitting here thinking about, as a more extreme athlete, perhaps being addicted to pain. And I don't mean the literal aspect of pain beyond a certain threshold, which then is disabling. But when you work out hard, it's painful. When you are in the recovery process after a hard workout, that's painful. Getting out of bed at 4:30 in the morning when you don't want to is literally painful. It's a negative reinforcement. It's a pushback. So when you think about human nature and you think about how the human brain operates, and we're processing information and we're storing it, we'd like to think that we're evolving, that we're making sense of that information. Pain and pushing through it does not seem logical. It's a disconnect. Therefore, I think there are some people that are just built that way. We've talked about David Goggins many, many times on this program, former Army Ranger, former Navy SEAL, mega marathoner, who doesn't really believe that he has stretched himself at the very least until he is dehydrated. He has broken bones in his body. His body is shutting down. He's told countless stories specific to that. So when you think about this pain element, you as a young man still engaging in that professional aspect of sports, while you might dabble, a little less the older that you get, how does pain push back on you in your pursuit of that chase?
Yeah, and I think that there's a delay of gratification that comes with the pain. And what I mean by that is, because you're seeking that championship, it's, all of that hard work paid off. And so sometimes we base that work on the outcomes as well, right? Is this destructive to me, or did I win? Was I successful? And so then all of that pain that we put ourselves through is justifiable, versus the one who did lose, or who lost in the first round but put in all of this work, got up at the same time, right? Worked out, practiced hard, did all of that stuff, and now it's no longer as justifiable as, did I do enough? Did I do everything I could? Versus the person who reaches the pinnacle on the top. So I think we justify the pain sometimes based on the outcome of our successes. For myself, I think that pain that you're mentioning, I call hard work, and I think they can be synonymous with each other. And it's, am I delaying this? Am I trying to make sense of it in my own head, of saying like, okay, I'm just gonna take myself back and almost dissociate from the pain and say, no, this is hard work. I'm working hard. I'm making myself better. That's what I'm doing. And that's maybe the mindset that it takes sometimes to be in that pain, right? To embrace the pain.
Well, I think of someone like Tiger Woods. I think of, and I don't know what year it was, when he essentially blew out his own knee because he's created so much torque with his golf swing. Right. And he ended up winning that tournament. I believe it went into like a sudden death situation. And he was victorious. He again pushed through. Then he got the surgery. I think he was out of the game for, I think, a minimal of a year, if not longer. When you think about certain athletes and their threshold, and you're talking here about separating the pain from hard work, and they can be, maybe in your mind, they can be synonymous. One is related to the other. Is there ever a time where, in the name of addiction, where pain becomes the very catalyst for our brain to then recognize, hey, wait a minute, something's not right here, but yet I'm going to push through anyway? Can we get addicted to that?
Yeah, I think so.
That, that battle,
right?
That battle of me versus something, because very often I've done research on pain. It shifts our attention, right, from our external world, which we take for granted, to our internal world, because now the very thing that we've always assumed that it's going to be A-okay, that's now compromised.
Well, I think it depends where that pain is heading. Is that pain inhibiting you from doing things, or is it allowing you to do more things? Thinking about the athlete who's working out, that's the pain, but now as a result of it, they're stronger. But an athlete who works out and then tears their bicep or bums their back, now it's not as worth that pain. Now that mental strain, every time they go to work out after that, now it's in the back of their head. And I've had this myself, where I was lifting and I kind of got folded over like an accordion, doing maybe an extra set of squatting, and had a bail, and then I had a pinched nerve in my back, and then now I can't move. Now I'm not as effective. Okay, now I've been hesitant to squat, and that was my main workout for a long time. And so now, how do I mentally come back from that? How do I go back to that shift of, okay, well, that's going to make me stronger. It's going to make me jump higher, move faster. And so I think, again, we base our decisions based on the outcome. Pain is good if it makes me better. Pain is bad if it hurts me. And
but you also speak, though, I think, too, it's more apparent that when you talk about this, you're very focused on recovery and what that does to people, what that journey is like.
Well, yeah, in recovery is the main aspect of it, is can you recover effectively from that pain? And again, I go back to withdrawal. People go in and out of rehabs. They go with forced withdrawal, or they've selected to go through withdrawal. And some people come out and they feel like, okay, that's my experience. I need to connect. I find support, and they end up becoming very healthy and live fairly normal lives. And then, throughout recovery in its own way. And then some people go back into it even after withdrawal, not necessarily taking the lessons maybe that come with it. And again, I think there are other circumstances obviously underlying that, but the challenge that comes with it is, how do you grow from your challenging experiences? There's a lot of people who come from addiction, and when I say addiction, means drugs and alcohol, but other addictions as well, who have been very successful, who are the people who are like, I've overcome mountains, I've overcome challenges. Now they're becoming public speakers, they're becoming internet icons, they're becoming people who are pushing past it. And athletes are the same. It makes me think of Arnold in Pain and Gain, about his bodybuilding career as he chases another world's the world's strongest
Mr.
Olympia, that's right. And he was like, I love the pump. He's like, it's better than sex. Like, the pump is where it's at. The blood rushing through your arm. It's the last 3 sets that separate you from the other person, where you're pushing through it. Your muscles are shredding, but it's going to build up. And, that's the chase. That's what you were looking for, that pump. To feel.
When you talk about Arnold, and I think of stories about him coming over from Austria, and he does a significant amount of motivational speaking now, and he makes so much sense when he talks. Coming over, I think at age 17, with big dreams and the American dream, and all of which he went after and was very successful in achieving that. I think of someone like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that supports in my mind the theory that there's a certain DNA that genetically is going to push yourself through those limits in the name of, as you said earlier, to your success. But also, if he's all about the pump, can we then say that addiction, as we are discussing it, needs to be part of that plan for success to take place? Does he have to be so consumed? Does he have to be so ... about his life that he now knows that without that pump, he can't be successful? I'm trying to make the parallel.
I'm just thinking about if you think about, I'm not saying these are the greatest athletes, but thinking about athletes who are great. Tom Brady, right? Sacrifices, put other things before the game. So he's putting the game before anything else really in his life. Tiger Woods, driven to the game. Michael Jordan didn't care who he beat, didn't care who he offended. It was the push to get better, to get better, to get better. Michael Phelps, I think I know he was going to miss the Olympics and then ended up deciding to do it and didn't miss a single day in 3 years.
Yes.
Right? Of going into the pool, of working out, of driving to get better and better and better. Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? He would put people down before he would go on stage to make them feel demoralized when he would be standing with a huge frame next to them. He would literally talk bad about them.
He used to do that to Lou Ferrigno.
Right.
Louis.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's these people who, from outside perspective, if you didn't know about their greatness, you would say, this person is kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
This person is not a nice person. This person is kind of out there. And at the same time, these people are the people who are great. It's the drive, it's the mentality that in the context makes them great, makes them successful. And the addiction piece of addiction to that success, addiction overall, allows them to be stronger.
Lou Ferrigno, by the way, the original Incredible Hulk, just for the record. We are about out of time, my man. I appreciate your take. That athleticism that you bring, I think, is a real difference maker. So thanks so much for taking the time and sharing your perspective. My name is Dr. Lee Piccarello. Thank you so much for watching another edition of the Head Game Podcast, powered by Mindful Athlete Training, where we get athletes into the zone faster and keep you there longer.